there's a way to make an entrance.
This is my destiny.
It was now a conspiracy of witches.
Download Veely today.
Something very exciting is happening in American TV right now. A new generation of actors, writers and producers are creating shows that explore the Black experience with a frankness and sophistication we haven't seen before.
We're gonna bring the real world into the room. We're not doing it fake anymore. I'm gonna show up Black everywhere I go.
In a country polarized by race, they're beaming their truths into the living rooms of 300 million Americans.
We're just getting to the place where we can sort of kind of be human beings on screen.
Every single version of Blackness is starting to find its own moment in the sun. And that to me is a beautiful thing.
With new streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime, TV is finding ways of telling stories that outshine cinema. And they're winning huge audiences around the world. So what's really happening here in Hollywood?
Showing people that there's no one way to be Black. We're writers, producers, directors. We're not stuck in one place.
For creative people of color the world over, American TV is increasingly where the action is.
I'm intrigued by the fact that this is something that is fresh, but at the same time, I need to know if this is going to sustain or not.
I think it's changing, and I think we're definitely heading in a really positive direction.
We still got a long way to go. Like, we've had a Black president, but we never had a Black president of a studio.
When people think of Hollywood, they mostly think of film. But for me, it's in television that the most interesting work is being done here. And I've got a personal stake in the game.
I started in television when I was super young. I was 8 years old when I started in TV. And the first job I ever did, I was really fortunate to be surrounded by people that looked like me, which at the time I didn't realize the importance of. My first ever job was a show called Desmond's, which was a sitcom about a Black barbershop in Peckham. It wasn't until I was maybe 3 or 4 more jobs down the road that I realized how special being on that set actually was. It's kind of normal for me to almost always be the only Black person on set.
Now I have ambitions to write and direct my own material. And I've been inspired by the work of Black creatives here. A show like Donald Glover's Atlanta tackles with comic sharpness how it feels to be Black in America and the racial fault lines in the country. Sometimes brutal, sometimes self-deprecating and surreal, it's always brilliantly well observed. Similarly, Issa Rae puts her own lived experience as a Black woman center stage in her show Insecure. I've been developing a script, which I couldn't get off the ground in the UK, but I recently transposed it to the US, and it's been picked up by a big studio here. I think that tells us something about the different landscape in American television.
In creating a show and partnering up with an African-American executive as my producer, I've suddenly found myself a part of this world, and I'm now meeting people who are living the lives that I've always wanted to live.
Emmy-winning writer Trayvon Free is one of a wave of creatives who are determined to take control of their own material and wield some power behind the scenes. Trayvon started out as the only Black writer on the late-night satirical Daily Show.
What's up, brother? Good to see you,
You too, man.
It always make me feel bloody short when I'm running around. How's it going?
Story of my life, man. Good, man. Good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you, man. What was it like being the Black writer on a comedy show in a room full of white writers.
As much as I love that job, and the people there. On some level, it was a very isolating experience because I looked at the way that they connected with each other, and that just wasn't there for me. Like they were my friends, but it wasn't the same.
Do you think that the 90s version of you would be able to wear the t-shirt that you're wearing right now to work in one of those writers' rooms? Because when I walked in today, the first thing I noticed was your t-shirt,
right,
which lists people who have been killed by police officers.
Right. Now, we live in a culture where if I wore this shirt into a room and a white writer or producer or someone says something about it, they would basically get like shamed for it. 10 or 20 years ago, it would have been like pulling you aside and being like, hey, you're making people uncomfortable. Can you not, like, can you change your clothes? Or can you not, like...
But that shift, is that PC culture or is that a change in attitude and culture?
No, I don't think it's PC. I think it's a change in, like, attitude. Like, we're here, and not only are we going to be in the spaces we belong in, if you get to wear your Star Wars t-shirt, like, why can't I wear the shirt listing all the people the police killed? Like, if we're gonna have honest conversations on our shows and we're gonna write like real stuff, like we're gonna bring the real world into the room. We're not doing it fake anymore. We're not like pretending. Like, I'm gonna show up Black everywhere I go.
Is what you're saying that as African-American writers who have had to for so long understand mainstream and white culture, now have an upper hand in a way? Because you're able to walk into a room and know the world of the people you're surrounded by, whereas they've never really had to know yours.
Totally. I think now with this shift, like I look at Issa's room, and her room is like mostly Black with like 1 or 2 white writers, which is a complete inverse. And now they're writing a Black show. So it's like, imagine all the stuff they had to learn. That show's Black as hell. Like, now they're having our experience. And so I think it gives us an advantage because we know the world and white writers know their world because they've never had to learn our world. They never had to be a part of it.
All of these different shows present a different version of the African-American experience. Do you think that fundamentally that is the big difference between the content that is being produced now versus what's come before from different generations?
Oh, totally. I think it's definitely now. If before the 90s was this is Blackness, now you get shades of Blackness. Like you get just like a Rihanna Fenty makeup palette of Blackness where you just get every shade. Every show's a different shade. Donald's shade might be a little darker than Issa's. Now we get to make shows that are so specific where it's like they don't have to be generally Black. They can be like whoever we are as the creator. And I think the audience loves it because we're finally showing that Black people exist outside of what we're perceived as this one blob of culture. For years, we've watched every version of whiteness. This is the first time you get to see Black people be emotional, Black people go to therapy, to see Black people deal with sexual assault and abortion. I mean, our lives are not PG.
If Black lives in America aren't PG, you'd never have guessed it from some of the earlier crop of African-American shows.
Growing up, there was countless shows that I watched about Black families and about Black life, all African-American. Shows like Sister and Hanging with Mr. Cooper, The Fresh Prince, I mean, the list is endless. They were all pretty much sitcoms, and they were all lighthearted and very easy to sort of consume.
Whatever we might feel about it now, it was above all the Cosby Show that defined how the rest of America and the world saw African-American life.
I think Black creators today are more empowered because there's been a cultural shift. It's almost as if you're not authentic, you don't count anymore. And I think it's kind of obvious if people aren't being their true self now. The things that people are talking about now in art, from an African-American perspective, are consistently realer. in a way that I've never experienced. And I think the confidence is coming from what's happening everywhere. I think creators are looking at their peers and saying, well, if you can do it, so can I.
None of this would be happening without fundamental changes in the television industry. The explosion of cable channels like HBO and FX, plus streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime, is giving writers unprecedented opportunity to explore new forms of storytelling. One woman who's seen these changes up close is television's go-to casting director, Alexa Fogel. Alexa cast The Wire, one of the first wave of shows to pioneer the new novelistic ambitions of TV. The roles it offered to black actors, mostly cops and criminals, were nothing new in themselves. But with writing of this depth, even street dealers became fully rounded human beings.
You've been instrumental in some projects that I've referred to as seminal, things like The Wire and Atlanta, and lots of shows in between. Now, why would you say that those shows have had such an impact and have been heralded as kind of moments in time?
I think that I am fortunate enough to work with writers who have a strong point of view about the world and write interesting, complex characters that interact with each other in a way that people identify with that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So that has an impact.
One of the stigmas, I guess, for me as a fan and also as a creator myself is this idea of black shows and black films. You're nodding because you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Why such a knowing nod?
I once had someone ask me something about The Wire and using a phrase like that about a black show, and I really took issue with it. I said, this is not a black show. There are just a lot of black actors on it, black characters. And you know, ultimately, as I keep saying, for me, this is about storytelling. This is about reflecting the world around us in whatever way it's happening. I work on lots of different kinds of shows.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell me why you think a show like Atlanta, for instance, has such a resonance, even though, well, with everyone, even though it's so specific to the black experience.
I think it's just so honest. You know, I mean, we read these scripts and we are delighted with how truthful they are and truthful through a prism of both absurdity, honesty, but it's the absurdity of real life. It just resonates with people because you recognize it. It's familiar even if it's not your own experience.
If we were having this conversation maybe a decade ago, I would have had a massive chip on my shoulder. Because you definitely don't remember, but in a former life, I was an actor. And I had 4 castings for Generation Kill. And I was absolutely obsessed with the role of Halsey that I never got from you. I didn't get that part maybe 10 years ago. Now, you've cast loads of British actors that have gone on to have careers in a way that I never did have. And one of them is actually a mentor of mine, and that is the incredible Idris Elba. At the time that he got the role in The Wire, there weren't many people like him from the UK getting roles over here, whereas now there is an onslaught of black British talent. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't think that it didn't exist before. And by the way, that's also true in the States. I think that there just weren't roles. And, you know, it's always about the writing. So if you write it, I can find someone really good to play it.
Yeah.
I think that's expanded, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before I say goodbye, I just want to put it out there that if I were to cast for Generation Kill today, I would have nailed it. I would have definitely got that part.
You know, there's another actor who didn't get Generation Kill who never ceases to remind me of it.
No way. You got to tell me. Tom Hardy. Why didn't you cast Tom Hardy?
Now, we don't talk about why we don't do things.
Yeah, of course.
We talk about why we do things.
Audiences the world over are demonstrating that they love ambitious, complex shows. And streaming platforms are finding that they make business sense too. Netflix alone spent $12 billion on original content in 2018. It's an opportunity that Black creatives are seizing with both hands. Traditional networks try to appeal to the broadest possible mainstream audience, but Netflix targets specific demographics worldwide. It no longer matters if your show bombs in rural Iowa, if it's finding enthusiastic audiences from London to Lagos. One show that helps to explain the success of this new business model is Dear White People. It started life in 2014 as a low-budget indie movie. But as soon as it was picked up by Netflix and became a TV show, it became something more ambitious. From the sharply ironic opening sequence of the series, its creator Justin Simien boldly sets out his story as an unapologetically Black take on racial taboos in America.
I think Netflix, just by nature of their paradigm there, have taken a chance on different audiences and have shown that those audiences will show up and they'll spend money and they'll be devoted, And I think other people are following suit because they see that that's where the money is.
Yeah. An episode in particular of season 1, episode 5, the Reggie episode, I think triggered debate and encouraged conversation, and not just within the Black community, others as well.
If I'm going to say that what I make is art, it has to challenge the culture. It has to be a part of the cultural conversation. Otherwise, what is the point of it? It's just like, I think that stories should fill the spaces of our lives. Really good stories do. It's not just the hour and a half that you watched it or the half hour that you watched it. If it doesn't leave you with something, then I kind of feel like, well, what was the point of that? And the other thing is that it's impossible for me to be a Black man in America and not have a socio-political bent on my work, because if I'm not socio-politically minded, then I wouldn't survive living in America. You have to know what's going on. You have to know why your experience is different than the white people on TV. But that's not all it's about, It's not just about fighting racism. Even in a show like mine, Dear White People, you don't watch for the socio-political activism. You watch because you're like, oh, are they gonna hook up?
I keep hearing the word fearlessness being thrown around when it comes to your generation of creatives.
Fearlessness, I have no idea what that means or what that might feel like. I feel fear constantly and every day. This is a hard business for anybody.
Every creative
Am I going to get another job?
Every creative has that inferiority complex, imposter syndrome, it's probably more apt, right?
Every creator does, but Black people have it in a different, Black people have it, period. Like, creator, bank teller, doesn't matter. Like, we all have that because we don't see ourselves everywhere. We look, we see something else. And it's impossible not to internalize that as an imposter. So you take that and then you add the pressure of making a movie or making it in an industry like Hollywood. And it's just a different kind of feeling, man. I don't know how else to put it.
Is there an extra pressure due to the kind of content that you're creating?
If you're a filmmaker of color, you're gonna get think piece. It doesn't matter what you make. You can make a broad romantic comedy. People who don't think it's smart enough are gonna think piece the hell out of you. You can make the blackest superhero movie ever of all time. Well, you didn't tell the gay story. Like, you're gonna get think pieced, okay? As a creator of color, it's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna come for you. Somebody's gonna make an industry of coming for you.
It's inspiring to feel the energy and determination of a creative like Justin. But there's a massive irony hanging over every conversation that I've been having in LA. At the very moment that Black artists are finally freeing themselves of the constraints of the white mainstream, white middle America is asserting itself politically. Angry protests have been erupting across the country about the number of unarmed Black people killed by police. And even in the so-called liberal bubble of Hollywood, there are problems that haven't gone away. When a Netflix executive used the N-word in a meeting, it triggered media outrage, and he was sacked by the company. But watching the shop reports begged the question, how isolated an incident was this? Travell Anderson is a film and TV critic for the LA Times.
This looks pretty old school.
This campaign that I saw and got really excited about, A Great Day in Hollywood, it was interesting that it came out around the time that there was this story of a Netflix executive being sacked for using the N-word repeatedly. What do you think that tells us about what's happening in the business right now? And that doesn't seem to be an issue for Netflix specifically. It seems to be an industry-wide problem.
Well, it tells us that we've got a whole bunch of people who have particular types of ideas in the executive suites running things, right? It tells us that despite how liberal we might think Hollywood to be, we have a lot of traditionally minded people running things, right? And so if you can have an executive using the N-word in a meeting, not even in a private conversation, in a meeting, it now becomes something that is not just about on camera, not just about behind the camera, but also about the offices, the office space, and that culture that you're kind of cultivating around these projects that may or may not be diverse.
With everything that we're discussing and everything that we're seeing in the content that's being created, African Americans, black people the world over are celebrating what is coming out of this country from these black creatives that we've mentioned already. How do you think the mainstream and white audiences are not just reacting to what's being made, but also reinterpreting black lives and black culture?
I think it's important, all this conversation we're having about diversity, representation, inclusion. It's great to have all these black folks, these well-rounded characters on television, because they're going into the living rooms of these white folk in the middle of nowhere, right, who aren't on the East Coast or the West Coast, who maybe don't have black people in their community. And hopefully what that means is that when they go out on the street and they see a black guy walking down the street, they don't clutch their purse. They don't lock their door. They don't shoot us without, just because they're fearful of us. Because hopefully the folks on Atlanta or the folks on Insecure have shown them that black people are regular. Black people are just like them. Black people are not a reason to be fearful and scared. That is the impact of this conversation.
By no means is all the work coming out of Black Hollywood a response to Trump's America. But with the full range of the Black experience being transmitted into the homes of this deeply polarized nation, it's a big step forward. But just how much of a struggle have Black creatives been through to get to this point? At an event downtown, Dear White People creator Justin Simeon is in conversation with actor, writer, and producer Lena Waithe.
That's what's crazy to me is a lot of people learned about you through Master of None. And you won an Emmy for that.
Yeah.
Low key.
Yeah.
First black woman to ever win an Emmy.
I know.
For comedy writing.
Crazy.
Is it your fault that this year's Emmys was a lot whiter?
I think so.
Okay.
Me and Donald.
It was like a,
what about Donald?
Mostly you.
And Riz.
It was like the backlash, I feel like, of Lena Waithe. I was watching on Filmstruck. There's like a thing called Cartoon Roots on it right now, which is like the cartoons that led to Mickey Mouse and Looney Tunes and all that stuff. But the very first one, it's like 1907. It was like a sensation. It was the beginning of animation and film. And the first thing you see is a person paint the word coon.
What?
And then make a ape-looking black person out of the word coon. What? That's where we began. The roots of any American entertainment form is so linked to minstrelsy and slavery and someone was asking me the other day, it's like we just got to start being humans in the last decade.
And sometimes we do this minstrel show thing to ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that's the other weird thing about it, because for some audiences, it was delightful to see these stereotypes, because at least it was a black person.
Right.
At least there was somebody who kind of looked like you on screen, all of those early movies, Cabin in the Sky is one of them too. It's very problematic today, but at the time, black audiences delighted in it because at least you could hear Ethel Waters sing. That's the only place you could see it if you were an average, black person.
And one of her most infamous songs is Darkies Never Dream.
Whew.
It's shocking how stereotyped the versions of blackness produced by Hollywood used to be. But black talent coming into the business has always had to play the hand it was dealt. For many artists, the first move is to subvert the stereotypes and inject some humanity.
There he is. Hey. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
All right.
One man who's consistently done that in his acting career is Terry Crews.
Go on, let's see what you got.
We'll try it, and gutter all the way.
I'm gonna see if I can better that.
Oh, that's going.
Looking good, it's looking good.
Oh my God, that is a strike. Yes. I feel very inadequate right now.
There are 1,000,001 tropes associated with us as black men and what's expected of us. And you know, when you are the size that you are and when you have the look that you have, I imagine that there are a lot of stereotypical sort of roles that will be offered your way.
Stereotypes get you work. They do. Like everybody who shows up in Hollywood, your first job is a criminal. I did CSI. Turns out I did the murder.
Right.
But that's your way in. You know, it's kind of like, okay, we got that credit going. And I never knock anybody for doing that because it's part of the process. But it is your job to continue to push it, to continue to ask for more. And I ask for more. Like, the way I look, it normally would have been badass guy, he's kicking ass, he's doing action movie stuff, but I love to dance. I was like, and I would be in a movie doing dance moves, and they're like, hey, you know what, do it again. And it just kept going into a point where you're on your own.
Well, it feels to me as though you're playing a massive part in redefining a lot about the way that black men and their physicality is actually seen. Because you went viral with a tiny little moment from a movie that Keenan Ivory Wayans directed that correct me if I'm wrong here, but from where I stand, I'd say that little moment probably changed a lot in your career. And it's a throwaway little moment. So I'm obviously talking about White Chicks.
Yes. I did that one throwaway moment in the car, singing that song to Marlon in one take because it was so zoned out. That is how comedy puts the truth into your brain. It was as dramatic as any drama because it changed the way people saw black men for the first time on a worldwide level.
Yeah, it went everywhere. It was viral. It was
I love it. I love
that song.
I'm honored to be a part of that. I'm honored.
Yeah. Let's see what you got.
All right, let's do it. I'm gonna knock down these white pins. I'm kidding. Hey, that's the kid. I like white pins. White pins are amazing.
White pins are okay.
Black ball, white pin. Here we go. That's why I got a gutter. That's why I got a gutter. I wasn't meant to hit the white pins.
The system getting in the way, man.
I like you, white pins.
All right, let me see if I can hit this. There we go.
There you go. Look at that militant. The militancy.
This is a man who was told that he was one thing because of how he appears and has become something entirely different. And in the process of doing that, he's opened up the way that the world, he's a part of this. He's opened up the way that the world sees African-American men who happen to be big, who happen to be tall, and happen to be physically intimidating. It was by using comedy that Terry was able to overturn the stereotypes he was up against. And that's always been the way for black talent in America.
Anybody going to church Sunday? Amen, amen, amen. It's only one person going to church, huh? I'm gonna pray for everybody. You know they kicked me out the church.
You don't need money or industry connections to stand up in a club like this one and speak your truth. Right back to Richard Pryor in the 1970s, comedy has allowed black artists to say things that would otherwise be unpalatable and might even get you lynched. This tradition of using jokes to speak truths the mainstream might not want to hear still applies today. Someone who's been outspoken about the legacy of comedy for black artists is Lena Waithe. Lena won her Emmy for writing an episode of the hit show Master of None. In the episode, she sensitively unpicks sexuality from the perspective of of a young lesbian coming out, still something of a taboo in the black community.
The Thanksgiving episode was special because it was a black gay story, but it was also a human story.
Yeah.
What was it about that specifically, do you think, that made it transcend in the way that it did?
You know, it's interesting because I did not expect it to be as universal or as transcendent as it became. I was like, oh, dope. We're gonna have a black episode of The Master of None. Cool. A black gay episode of Master of None. Fantastic. You know, to me, the moment is about a breakthrough, you know, not just for me, but for, I think, our community, the queer community, and just black women who are writers in this town, because there's no way I'm the first black woman to write a script that is worthy of an Emmy for Best Outstanding Writing in a Comedy Series. I just happened to come along at the right time, and the women that came before me had been banging on that door for years, so when I walked up, all I had to do was just turn the doorknob and walk through.
With all the work that you've created, I imagine in the earlier stages of your career, you're having to pitch to get those shows actually made. And with your voice being so specific to the black experience, and at times the black queer experience as well, what's it like pitching those ideas to presumably majority white executives?
Here's the deal. It is, I think, the most frustrating thing one has to do, because it's still, and look, and it's not their fault. People on the other end of the table are not bad people. I'm not, you know, this person that like is always raging against the machine, but you know, the fact that we have to prove ourselves worthy of being seen is frustrating, you know, to people who don't walk in our shoes and don't live the lives that we live and don't inhabit the melanin that we do. It's about saying to them, I deserve to take up the space that I take up in the world. And they go, okay, cool, let us think about whether or not we want to have that on TV, or, you know, we still got a long way to go. Like, we've had a black president, but we never had a black president of a studio. And the truth is the images that get pumped into our living rooms every day is really, really important. You know, people can say what they want about Cosby, but the Cosby Show, the Huxtables led to the Obamas. You can't tell me that those two things are not connected.
So how do we get that first black president of a studio then?
I don't have the answer to that. I think that's a loaded question, and I think there's many ways to get there. But we need it. We need it, and that person will carry a huge burden, you know, of like what they get done and how fast they get things done and what comes out. But also, black people deserve the right to fail, and we don't really have that luxury yet. You know, but I love what Chris Rock always says, that that's the true meaning of equality, when we can be as mediocre as the next white guy.
How does this moment sustain? There are so many creatives now doing incredible work, but it's the same several people that we're talking about, yourself included.
Right.
How does this moment
we have to expand it. That's the thing. I think, to me, I don't like that there is like there's the list of like us that everybody knows, all that kind of stuff, which is great, but at some point we need to pass the baton. It's my job to continue to empower, continue to dig, continue to look, continue to find talent that I can then say, okay, take my hand, let's go in here, let me make sure you're ready, let me set you up for success, so that way they can eventually be sitting in this seat, and then we'll remember the moment when I took their hand, they'll remember to take someone else's. That really is, I think, how we change the business. And also the patriarchy is toppling over every day. I mean, it's like Game of Thrones out here.
What's different about now, in this moment that we're in, that creatives like yourself are getting dramas away, whereas in the 90s and in the 80s, that just wasn't happening?
It's still not really, you know, because if you look at the dramas, the black dramas that are out, it's like Power, Empire, and The Chi. We really haven't, I think, made it until we have what I would call a prestigious, like, black drama. Because comedies we got in spades. But we still need to, because I think it's easier for folks to laugh with black people than it is for them to sit with them in a real way. You know, it's easier for them to watch a show about us singing and dancing or goofing around or selling drugs and this and that. There still hasn't been like a black Game of Thrones, so to speak. I know they're still trying to crack that. They might, but we need that. We need a thing that everybody and their mama is like, ugh, we watching this thing.
I really enjoyed chatting to Lena because, you know, she is in a position where she can do incredible things because of the position that she's created, but also, and more importantly, she knows that for this moment to sustain and for it to continue in the way that everybody is hoping it will, she essentially has to be a part of the change. She has to empower to see this thing continue. The artists I've been meeting are shaking up the business by exploring the complicated reality of race in America today. And maybe the next step forward is for their race to only be one part of who black artists are. But are we anywhere near that point yet? At the age of 17, Caleb McLaughlin might be part of the answer. All right, come on, let's hit it, man. Threes. All right. Threes only.
All right, you go first.
Central.
You good.
Cheek from the side.
You got it.
Caleb shot to global fame in the Netflix 1980s set drama, Stranger Things. His character's race isn't particularly important in the show. He's just a lovably nerdy, normal kid, but he does get some sharply written scenes which cleverly hint at the racial politics of Reagan's America.
Do you have any mentors? Do you have any like sort of big brothers in the industry that look out for you, give you advice?
Yeah, people tell me the same thing. Just keep your head up and really just fight. Not like fight, but more keep your head up and stay and like be stable and like know and have like a stable mindset.
But that to me says that everybody recognizes that there are some challenges that you will face.
Yes.
How much do you think race plays a part in that conversation?
I feel like our generation now, we don't approach it that way like generations before did. Of course, I definitely do have that in the back of my head, so I'm not gonna act like I don't know what you're talking about. But this is when race comes into it. There's not many roles that are written for my kind of person, you know. But
even you feel that?
Yeah, so I understand that, but then that's when you have to start writing for yourself. I mean,
hang on a second. So even you feel that you need to create for yourself?
Yeah, because I'm gonna ask you this, right? You as a director or a writer, are you a writer as well?
I am. Yeah.
Who will you write for? You're gonna write for a person that looks like you. When you start writing, you write based on your life. So you're gonna write about your life, but not your life, stories. Your stories.
Yeah.
So you're gonna see a little young black kid, right? If you're white, you're gonna see a white kid.
Right. So you feel that it's important that you become a creator?
Yeah.
Even at 16, you feel that way? Yeah. See, I didn't feel empowered enough as a teenager to believe that. And also, nobody was telling me that. And more importantly, and I guess this is the big difference between the UK and the US and maybe our generations, there weren't any examples. And if there were examples, it was one or two people. Yeah. They were outliers. It was like, you have to be Spike Lee. You know, it weren't even British people that I would look at. It would be Americans that I would look at and say, I have to be like them to be able to have the power or the know-how to be the guy at the center of it.
Human beings are influenced by anything they look at, even if it's bad or not. If you're around it enough, that's what you're influenced by.
Right. So now with all of the black creators that you see out there doing incredible things, Ava DuVernay, you know, Kugler, Spike, you know, the list goes on and on now. You know, there is almost, I mean, for now, Issa Rae, there's too many to mention now. Lena Waithe, there's just a long list of people now, which is
and now
something
we want to get to a place where it's not just black creators.
Yes.
Because we don't want to always push it out as like, oh, black. Well, of course we're black. If everyone, we know that, right? But we want to also be known as people.
Or more importantly, black is not equal, or black is separate.
Yeah, separate. We want to push it as we're all together, and it's just a mix of race.
Yeah.
We'll know that lasting change has come to TV when a black person's experience can represent the whole audience's experience, the universal human experience, in the way white artists always have. The first two seasons of the HBO show True Detective featured white leads. In the new season, Oscar winner Mahershala Ali plays the soul lead. But his path hasn't always been an easy one.
So let me get my rhythm. Late comeback.
As a result of the score, he's contributing $10,000 to my charity.
As someone who has existed in the generation that paved the way, arguably, and who has arguably found themselves at the top of the mountain and winning that little gold man now at this point of your career, how does it feel to be a part of the past and a part of this brave new present?
Now you have a younger generation that is more free than my generation. My first television job was with Crossing Jordan, and it was a really difficult experience, you know? And I got fired from that job, and only job I've ever been fired from, and it was my first job. And I just didn't know how to play the game. Like, I didn't know how to not be honest about having an issue with a lack of writing. But I didn't realize that I was like coming out of school and just got plugged right into the machine. And the machine at that time had a very narrow view of Black culture, of Black people. And so it ended up leaving me very little space to exist honestly in it, you know, and feel like this is an honest and fleshed out reflection of a Black person, you know, and my name was coming up fourth on the show, you know? So when I look at my experiences and just how it's all sort of laid out for me, I had to win an Oscar to get a leading man opportunity. Like I wasn't even auditioning for leads. Awards or no awards, like that's just been my experience. And I'm grateful for everything I've had. True Detective was amazing, and I think we did amazing work, and I applaud them for saying yes and giving me the opportunity to do it. I'll share something with you. So I won the Oscar. I didn't get offered that part. I asked to play the lead. They went away, sat on it, thought about it, and came back and said, yeah, okay. And they went and rewrote and retweaked and went deeper, and because I pitched myself for it, you know? It's still a fight for me, you know, in a very real way. And so I do appreciate and recognize, I absolutely recognize that it's changing. I can see it. There's more content with not just Black, but just people of color in existence, like out there. You can't argue that it's just true. But the route to get there where somebody says yes, it's not necessarily what you think. Awards or no awards. Me, as a Black man growing up in this country, I've been told that you gotta ask. You know, you have to, it's not gonna just get offered to you. And that's been my experience.
Well, with that being the case, what has the Screen Actors Guild Award and the Oscar changed for you?
It's made it easier for me to ask, and it's made it harder for them to say no.
Speaking of your successes, I think Moonlight was so successful because we've seen 1,000,001 drug dealers depicted in cinema, let alone Black drug dealers. But for there to be one who was a father figure, who was conflicted, who had all of these layers that you delivered in that performance, was heartbreaking to me because I'd never seen it before.
Right. I think Moonlight is such a shift in the conversation that now that you know, you can't unknow. You can't not know that every drug dealer is actually is a human.
People are throwing around the word Renaissance at the moment. A lot of people are saying that we're in the middle of a Black Renaissance.
Yeah.
The question...
I would say the beginnings.
The beginning, interesting, because
I would say the beginning.
The question that comes to mind for me is, can this sustain? But if this is the beginnings, we're only just getting started.
Yeah, we're definitely heading in a really positive direction, you know? Speaking as an actor, we're still very much, though, at a place where color is too much part of the article. We'll be doing really well when that is a footnote in it, you know, that, oh yeah, by the way, so-and-so is an African American. It's still a way to divide out and say that this is where white culture is, that's the bar, that's the barometer for what is good, and where are you as a Black person in comparison to that?
Right.
you know, and opposed to like really being a part of it. And I think it's changing. It's just we're not there yet though.
There's a spirit of confidence amongst the artists I've met in this town. And it's that, above all, that makes these changes feel as though they are going to last.
I've always sort of felt that I've had the ability to do more than what I'm doing now. For a long time, I didn't think that I was good enough in a lot of ways. I didn't think that I was smart enough to make documentaries, and now I'm nearly a decade in making docs. I didn't think that I was talented enough to write and direct, and that is now a huge part of my future. And the time that I've spent here has seen me talk to people that haven't had as many moments of self-doubt. And if they have, they've silenced that self-doubt and executed. And to know that a lot of the issues that I've had internally have come from me and have come from a place of thinking that as a black man, maybe my voice won't be heard by those in positions of power. I've been inspired by what's happening here in Black Hollywood for a long time. And now off the back of these conversations, I feel galvanized to do the same thing in my own way. And I didn't imagine that I would come here feeling this strongly when I left. But I do. I've got a lot of work to do.